Eagles. Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody. A Thursday edition of Birds 365, a special, unique Thursday, Johnny Mac. Some major thunderstorms last night. I was not expecting these. I thought there were just like some regular storms coming through the area where I was. And we got thrashed with lightning and thunder, and trees were down, and the power was out all night. And
Oh,
I'm
man,
talking to the
that's all.
marshal. Yeah, I was talking to the marshal this morning. He's like, "Yeah, you're not getting power anytime soon." So I'm over at Panera Bread. Shout out to Panera Bread, and we are doing the show from Panera this morning. How you doing this Thursday?
I'm doing well. We got hit, but not that badly, so I'm good. I was complaining about my mulch running out, so now I can't complain about that. Those are first world problems. So, but I've been there in the past, and it sucks when your power goes out. So hopefully Panera Bread can hold for you. I'm in my home studio, so hopefully I don't have the same types of issues. But yeah, we're in danger. What episode is this? I haven't checked. We were in danger of not having episode number 806 or whatever it is. So, but we're here.
We are here, and we are ready to give you guys 2 hours of power on Eagles Talk. Jason Kelce was down in Seattle yesterday. A lot of good topics for us to talk about. We have Les Bowen coming up in about 15 minutes, so he'll be here at 8:20 a.m. To talk with us and Johnny Mac. So we'll see how the internet holds here in Panera Bread. If it does drop out, I apologize to anybody listening. Speaking of our listeners, I want to welcome everybody in this morning. Wilfredo, Eduardo, Yale, Jesse, Shonuff, Cody K, Madness, Crowley, Jason. What's going on, everybody? Good morning, Birds Nation. Good morning, Eagles Nation. Thank you guys for watching Birds 365 this morning. Make sure you guys drop a like. Johnny Mac, the legend of Jason Kelce, continues to grow bigger and bigger and bigger. Seattle City was packed up yesterday for Jason Kelce. What do you have to say about Jason and the center that's taken over the NFL?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. We were talking about it a little bit before we went on the air. When they first started this thing, it was sort of quaint and, a fun little thing for Eagles autism. Now it's just giant. People are lining the streets at 4 a.m. and it's become this thing. And Jason always has the player put on the luchador mask as he was handing out the first Jello shots yesterday. But I hope everybody had fun down there, and obviously it's for a good cause, the charity event, the Eagles Autism Foundation. By the way, they're up for an ESPY award, that too. Throw that in the mix for the Sports Humanitarian Award, the Eagles, for their charitable things they do in the community, particularly with autism, which is very close to Jeffrey Lurie's heart because his brother has gone through that his entire life. So that's sort of the background of why Jeffrey is so invested in that particular cause. But and we're going to talk about this with Les. Hopefully Les, by the way, didn't have any issues. Hit and miss with the thunderstorms that were in the Delaware Valley. So, but he tweeted out something that I thought was interesting because Les has been around a long time. He's covered Philadelphia sports for a long time. Was a beat writer for the Flyers before he shifted to the Eagles. And he just mentioned that, as far as local celebrity goes, sports celebrity, I don't think anybody has ever reached the heights of Jason Kelce. It's like a perfect storm. Part of that is his brother, part of it's Taylor Swift, and you bringing in all these new people and watching the podcast. But I will say it's pretty amazing to watch. And now everybody gets to see the personality that we've got to see behind the scenes for many years. And it's up front. You're going to see it as in the broadcasting aspect of it. But what he's been able to do, and just recently we talked about on the show, the NFLPA has a top 25 merchandising list every year. Typically, it's dominated by quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts was number 1 this year.
Yeah.
Until last year, no offensive lineman has ever made that top 25 list. Jason made it last year. I believe he was 17th. This year, he was 2nd in the entire NFL. Everybody. Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Travis Kelce, his brother, for the same popularity reasons as we're
See, I thought
talking.
Travis would have him beat just because of the Taylor
Yeah,
Swift effect.
because of the Taylor
Yeah.
Swift effect. No, Jason beat him. He beat everybody except Jalen Hurts. The Eagles were 1-2. And part of that is, when you become, it's like Super Bowl 52. I remember there were so many more Eagles fans in Minnesota than New England fans. And I was like, well, New England's going there basically every year. Those trips
Yeah,
are
right.
expensive, and you got to pick and choose, and make some sense. Not that Eagles fans don't travel that well, but you would see the same thing if they made a bunch of Super Bowls. You got to kind of pick and choose. And that's the case. Patrick Mahomes has been doing it for so long. So, he was third. And your merchandising takes a little bit of a hit from somebody who may spike for 1 year, but the consistency remains. But an offensive line being in the top 10, never mind number 2, is just unbelievable.
It really is amazing. I brought up the Taylor Swift effect for Travis. I almost wonder if it's opposite in terms of how much more relatable to your regular football fan Kelce is. I mean, he married a local Eagle fan. He's chugging beers with everyone. Not to say that Travis doesn't do that, but Travis is married to a superstar. Travis is
Yeah.
married to a. So I think the
Kylie people are going to come after you. But,
no, Kylie's a superstar too, but I mean from a
she's
relatability
a local
element. Yeah, she went
superstar,
to
yeah.
school. Yeah, she went to school around
Which
here.
ironically, Taylor Swift is from the area, and she was in the as her father particularly. There's a great clip out there for their podcast, Jason and Travis's podcast, because her dad had been an Eagles fan for years and years and years, and obviously, when Travis came along, he's now wearing Chiefs gear, so
Yeah.
Jason gave him the business for that. But yeah. So anyway, yeah, Jason is. It's gotten to the level where it's pretty amazing, and good for him. Glad for him. Great player, better person, entertaining person, and everybody's getting to see it now.
Yeah, and it's not going to be local. I mean, it's already not local, but I mean, I think that the legend of Kelce might really just be beginning. I know his football career is now in his rearview mirror, but he's got a lot of stuff lined up, and he is going to continue to resonate with football fans all across the world, as he has, and you're seeing it right now. I'm curious to know if anybody in our chat was down there in Seattle. Yes, I know we have some people that are local to the area, some people that might go down to the Jersey Shore. If you were in Seattle for Kelce's extravaganza thing, drop it in the chat. I'd love to hear what you guys, if you guys had some time to spend down there. So pretty good stuff. Speaking of Kelce, Johnny Mac, let's stay on Kelce real quick because he did retire, and the Eagles are going to lose him on the football field this year. I know we've hashed this many times before, but how well positioned are we to move forward? I know everybody's like, yeah, I feel good about Cam Jurgens, and I do too, but it's tough to replace a guy that has not just that level of play, but the stature, the leadership, the on-field stuff, the off-field stuff. I mean, Kelce really he embodied the entire Philadelphia Eagles organization. That's tough to replace. Are the Eagles set up to do it and be able to handle it?
Yeah, I think they're set up to do it and able to handle it. The question is, we just brought up Brandon Thorne's offensive line rankings. He's very good when it comes to breaking down offensive line play in the NFL, and he's still got the Eagles at number 2 behind the Detroit Lions, who are kind of above and beyond in their own tier from his perspective. But number 2 is pretty good. And I know from talking to Jeff Stoutland this spring, there's no concern from the Eagles that Cam Jurgens can handle the center position. Now, there's levels to that. And they know he's going to be a good player. It's a matter of how good he's going to be. Is he going to be in the conversation to be the best center in football? Probably not early on, maybe a couple years down the road. Remember, Jason Kelce wasn't in that conversation. Jason Kelce thought he was going to get cut in 2016. For people that don't remember, so it'll take a while, but the Eagles are very confident that they're going to have solid play at the center position, and their bigger uncertainty from the offensive line as a whole is with Tyler Steen at right guard, and that's why they have a bunch of contingencies, as they did going back to the Super Bowl season when they wanted Isaac Seumalo to win the left guard spot. He started out, he struggled. They benched him. They put in Chance Warmack. They benched him. They finally ended up on Stefan Wisniewski. This year, you have Matt Hennessy, you have Matt Sharping, you have Mekhi Becton. They have a bunch of contingencies if Tyler Steen doesn't work out early, at least. And that's the bigger concern from the Eagles' perspective, not center. I think the silver lining I talked about yesterday, I think it's an opportunity to allow Jalen Hurts to take a bigger hold on the offense. I mentioned with pass protection, you're not going to do it when Jason Kelce's still here. But now that he's not here, I think you have the perfect opportunity to allow Jalen Hurts to take the lead and take ownership of this offense and kind of run it from the line of scrimmage. And I don't know if the Eagles are going to do that. So that's one I don't like. But we'll see. They have an opportunity. It's easy to do now, but I don't know if they want to do it. And Kellen Moore kind of hinted, didn't come out and fully say it, but he kind of hinted that they're going to stick with the status quo. And that's sort of Cam Jurgens taking the lead when it comes to pass protection. And I think that should be the quarterback, as I mentioned with Tom Brady and his comments and explaining all the things. You got to be on the same page either way. So I talked to a personnel executive. That's what he said. It really doesn't matter, but I think it does matter. I think it's important for the quarterback to be the lead in the dance, so to speak, as far as, following along. And I think the Eagles would have had an opportunity to take that step. They still have an opportunity to take that step. They still might do it. But Kellen Moore at least hinted that it's going to be Cam Jurgens, and it can work. They won 29 of 32 games at one point, and I call it the best run of Eagles football in the modern era, and I think it is. So it's not like it can't work, but I would just, my preference, and this is my preference, would be to have the quarterback. I'm always striving to get Tom Brady or Peyton Manning. That's who I'm striving to get. Now, it's unlikely that you're getting that, but it doesn't mean you can't work for it. And that's where I am with that aspect of it.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. And I feel like from the continuity perspective and just the overall, offense, I said that kind of when Kellen got hired. I'd like for Jalen Hurts to own this offense. And that's why I loved what he said in the one comment, about taking ownership of the offense and making it his, because if you're going to be a great team, and we talk about this all the time, you're going to lose coordinators. And if you want to mitigate how bad that is, then it's got to be, the offense has to be, Jalen Hurts has to have a full ownership in a way of the offense. And when it comes in, there's not that much change. There's not 95% new. There's a different play caller in the room, but it's Hurts who owns the room. And I think that would be a good thing to have, especially for a young quarterback who wants to have a long career here in Philadelphia. Back to your point too about the silver lining of him taking the next step. Lane Johnson, now he came out yesterday. Jalen Hurts is being a more vocal leader. It's just like all these headlines are coming out after all that talk about.
Well, you got to do damage control after.
Yeah, I know.
Unfortunately, if there's no damage, you don't have to do damage control.
That's true.
But you get these questions, and there, Lane was on. What was he on? Rich Eisen's show, or I think it was
Rich Eisen. Yeah, Rich Eisen.
Yeah, and he gets asked the question, and what are you going to say? If you're Lane Johnson, that's kind of my problem with what Jalen Hurts didn't say.
Yeah, right.
Created
same scenario. Lane just passed the test.
My vision for this show, and I saw it yesterday. Why didn't you have BG on and Lane on? And we can have those guys on, but no offense, my envision for this show was to be more of a sports reporter's feel. You know, if anybody used to see that show back when it was on ESPN, back when it was great. The recent incarnations maybe not so great, but nonetheless, that was my envision of this show, to have the reporters, because I want to make it as objective as possible. Not that we don't have our own biases, everybody does, but make it as objective as possible. If you ask Lane Johnson or Brandon Graham or anybody else about Jalen Hurts being a leader, they're going to say he's a leader and he's doing this and they're doing that. Like, and that's what I expect him to say. And there's nothing wrong with that. But, you know, they're veteran guys. They're not going to drop that ball.
Oh, I'm happy they didn't drop the ball and add to fuel to the fire. So good stuff from Lane Johnson. Let's get to our first commercial break. I see our man Les Bowen in the green room, one of the best guys covering the Eagles for a long time. Always great to read his work, working now for PHLY, and has his own thing, Les Bowen's John. So we'll get to Les Bowen's John. Today is a Panera Bread edition for anybody just checking in. Power was out last night in my hometown. Trees went down, took out all the power lines. The fire marshal looks at me and he says, "You might want to find a new spot to do your show, my friend, because you are not going to have power in the next couple hours." So here we are at Panera Bread. Shout out to Panera Bread. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Stay tuned here on Birds 365. Les Bowen coming up next.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your green house? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Up. And go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles. EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody. A Thursday edition of Birds 365, joined now by Les Bowen. Les, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm glad you're safe and dry there at the Panera.
Yeah,
thank you, Les.
I'm glad you're all right. It seems you're in the home base,
Yeah.
Les. Yeah, we had some storms here in South Jersey. But I hope everybody's okay all over. Obviously, some people got hit worse than others. That's kind of what thunderstorms do.
They do, yes.
But I don't think anybody can take the head off Jason Kelce. I saw your tweet. I retweeted you, Les. I thought that was an interesting take. The Kelce celebrity beach bartending thing for Eagles autism down at Seattle. I went to the first one. I haven't been back, Les. It's grown. It was quaint, the first one. Now it's this giant thing where people are lining up at 4:30 in the morning. It's pretty amazing what Jason Kelce has turned into. And you mentioned he's reached perhaps a previously unmatched level of local sports celebrity here in the Delaware Valley. I kind of agree with you. I mean, I was a big Julius Erving guy growing up. I say it all the time. He was sort of this iconic figure already, but you know, the Sixers were drawing 7,000 for Easter Sunday playoff games at times. It was a different era.
Plus, after, you know, Doc kind of didn't live here after his career, you know, which limited how big he could be, you know.
He's working for the Orlando wasn't he? At some point? The Orlando Magic, I think.
Yes.
But anyway, I mean, they're big guys along the way, and you covered the Flyers for a long time. Bernie Perrant has one of those guys who stuck around. A lot of those Flyers guys stuck around the area from the
Bobby Clark is a huge it certainly was, and it is a huge icon, muddled somewhat by his general managing career. But even that, one of the things I said in that tweet was it's a different era, you know, with social media and podcasts and things. And I think he's reached a level, partly because of that nobody else really could attain, because they don't. He's the guy in this era, you know. Richie Ashburn probably is the closest thing, I would say. Xander's probably not old enough, but John probably is. You know, Richie had a column in the Daily News that he wrote himself.
I
often edited when I was a copy editor. You know, he was on the radio broadcast and the TV broadcast every night, and he was one of the great players in Phillies history. He was certainly, you know, his catchphrases like "hard to believe, Harry" still resound. But it was a different era, you know. Whitey's been gone for like 25 years now, and
Whitey, and you know, you had mentioned maybe the column, I think, was, you know, his version of the podcast. The podcast has exploded for Jason and Travis, and a lot of people say it's because of Taylor Swift and Travis, and I kind of buy into that. But I brought up
nationally, but locally, do people really? I think Jason Kelce's big on his own locally. I don't really think Taylor Swift and his brother factor into it that much with Eagles and Philly people. Now, in terms of his national profile, sure. Yeah.
But even from, and I don't know if you saw the list this year, the NFLPA comes out with that list of the top 25 merchandise sellers every year. Last year, and this speaks to even the national part. I agree with you with the local part, but even the national part. Last year, Jason Kelce became the first offensive lineman in history to crack the top 25 in history. I think he was 17. This year, he was number 2, Les. Number 2. He was ahead of Travis.
Yeah.
You would think the Taylor Swift effect nationally. Travis was very high. He was top 10. I forget the exact number, but he might have been 5. Yeah. Jason was number 2 as an offensive lineman. That's you know, a lot of that is driven locally. Obviously, the vast majority of people, I imagine, who are buying Jason Kelce's merchandise are doing it in the Delaware Valley. But he was over at Wembley in London for Taylor's concert, and you got all these clips running around, and there's all these Jason Kelce jerseys.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It really is.
It is. It's remarkable. And I have to say, I covered just about the guy's whole career, and I didn't really see this coming. I mean, I enjoyed his presence and used him quite a bit as someone to explain what was going on to me, you know, and had a great relationship with him over the years, but if you'd asked me even after the Super Bowl and the Mummer's costume and all that, I would never have predicted this.
No, well, how could you? I mean, how could you? Again, he's an offensive lineman. Why? Yeah. We've been covering sports for a long time. Why would that even enter your mind that an offensive lineman, and they're often, from a reporter's perspective, Les, they're the best guys to talk to. They're always in every NFL locker room. And the Eagles more so because you have Lane is great to talk to when he does want to talk, which he didn't much last year, but when he does, he's phenomenal. Jordan Mailata is unbelievable when he can cut out the F-bombs because, for the TV people, he might be a little bit difficult because you got to he's got the Shane Steichen F-bomb thing going. And we'll see how Cam Jurgens develops. But the offensive linemen are always the guys. And when you want to get great quotes and get the real feel for the locker room. And that's in every NFL city, but even more so here because of the guys and what they've meant to this organization and this team. So I wanted to give Jason his flowers, and you did a great job of doing that on your X account at Les Bowen. Make sure you follow Les, by the way, and read him at PHLY as well.
Thank you.
Now on the field, I get this feeling, Les, that the Eagles are not concerned about center. They really believe in Cam Jurgens. That's not to say he's going to be Jason Kelce right off the bat, but you get this feeling they're very, very confident. And I don't know if you saw the Tom Brady clip going around where Tom kind of explained and boiled down modern quarterback play in about 5 minutes. I thought it was tremendous.
The main takeaway was pre-snap.
Yeah.
And sort of what happens before the snap. You have to. The key thing is for the quarterback to know that the play that he's about to start he's going to work against this defense. That it's not doomed from the.
And so much goes into it as far as understanding what's going on with the defense, moving protections, and things like that. Now, I think the silver lining potentially of Jason Kelce leaving was that Jason handled all that stuff from a pass protection standpoint. And let's be honest, you're not going to take that away from Jason Kelce. I think now you have this opportunity to say, all right, let's put it on the quarterback.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily, I don't want to hold anybody up to the Brady standard. I was saying before you came on the show, but I think you should strive to get to that standard.
Oh yeah.
And I want the quarterback in control of that. And I think the Eagles have an opportunity. I fear Kellen Moore didn't come out and say it, but he intimated it's still going to be Cam Jurgens. They're still going to have that set up. I don't like that, Les. Am I overthinking that?
I don't know. That's an interesting point. Let me think about this. It certainly would. Well, I was kind of interested. I saw a note last night about Hurts. This is his 5th season, and we don't really think of it that way. We still think of him as a young quarterback, but 5 years is 5 years. I don't think it's unfair to expect that of him. Whether that's who he is, I don't know. I think that's one of the questions that he needs to answer this season is how much of that has he mastered? How good is he at recognizing what a defense is about to do and so forth. I think the Eagles have generally had the center do this. I can't off the top of my head think of a quarterback who was really responsible. McNabb was not. I don't think Vic was or Nick or any of those.
Nick's it hasn't been anybody since prior Jason Kelce. I can tell you that. But you were here back then. I can't speak to before Jason was here.
I'm pretty sure that Jamal Jackson and Hank Fraley set the protections. I could be wrong about that.
Yeah.
I don't know if Jeff Garcia or somebody would have would have called his own.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
Well,
and it
I
didn't
did
last very
ask.
long.
I did ask the personnel guy, and he said it's not that big of a deal because they got to be on the same page anyway. So
They do, yeah.
But from my perspective, I was like, I get that, and they certainly had success. I mean, at one point they won 29 of 32 games with the setup they had. So it's not like it can't succeed. But I still go to the point of I'd rather have the quarterback in charge. If it was an option, maybe it's not an option from their perspective.
Absolutely. I agree with you there. And I think, that aspect of his game, certainly, whether he's really calling the protections at the line or not, that part of his quarterbacking of analyzing and recognizing is something that needs to develop and hasn't been of strength.
Yeah, I think it's one of the fair, I don't want to say criticisms, but concerns when you talk about the quarterback. I mean, you hear a lot of things this offseason about he took a step back, but on the field play, I don't really want to criticize it because I saw in 22 what I saw. I saw him elevate his play to play at an MVP level, and not only during the regular season, when the lights were the brightest in the Super Bowl. So it's tough to criticize that part of his game, but when you get to the off the field, or I guess in this case on the field, but the pre-snap stuff, it's a fair concern. And the one thing I will say too is it seems like if it was him doing it, wouldn't it give him an extra, even if it's just a few tenths of a second, to make those decisions, to go through those progressions a little bit quicker, to make those decisions when you snap the ball. I think it would give, even if it's just 3 or 4 tenths of a second, that matters in the NFL. That matters when you have, pass rushers coming at you. And I think that would help him take that next step and make him a better quarterback overall.
That's a good thought, Zander. Yeah. And I think Kellen Moore talked about, I think they want to do things in sequence more this year. So there will be some pressure on him to just, drop back 1, 2, 3, look at this, look at that throw, and that has not been his strength, I don't think.
Yeah. And Kellen's smooth offense, I think that would help with that as well.
Yeah.
And by the way, I think, if they just clean up the turnovers and get back to taking care of the football, I think they're going to be fine offensively.
Yeah.
I mean, there's too much talent on this.
Right.
team.
And I would make the point that we kind of almost get to Jalen wasn't bad last year.
No.
I mean, the turnovers were a problem, and the offense kind of went to hell down the stretch and was horrible in that playoff game. But overall, Jalen did some very good things last season. And I think the debate sometimes gets a little bit out of whack about that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he was leading the MVP betting odds when they were 10-1. He was going to be the MVP if he kept it going. Obviously, they didn't.
Right.
But, yeah, his entire season was not bad. I'm with you 100%. In fact, I think it was pretty darn good up until the collapse where everybody looked bad, including Jalen Hurts. But it was a team effort as well. The coaching staff, throw everybody in there. Everybody deserves blame, and I still can't figure it out, to be honest.
No.
The enormity of that collapse, Les. But, the shift from Nick Sirianni's offense to Kellen Moore's offense, whether you want to throw 25% on it or 95% as Jalen Hurts did, which I think has more to do with the terminology than anything else.
I would think so, yeah.
Yeah. There is this thought that quick throws, dump it off to the running back. I'm kind of torn on that because I don't think that's what Jalen Hurts is comfortable with. I don't think that's the best part of his skill set. And I'm at the point where I make the spring training. I'm going to go Jim Schwartz on you, Les, and I'm going to give you the baseball analogy. Like a starting pitcher in baseball might go down to Florida in the spring, and he might want to add a change up to his repertoire, and he'll work on it, and it'll look awful in the Grapefruit League, and people, what's wrong with so-and-so? And he's working on a new pitch. He's trying to get better. He's trying to evolve his skill set. And then when he goes north, he'll scale back to what works for him, and he stays a top pitcher. Generally, that's what happens with really good pitchers. In the case of Jalen Hurts, I think at practice, you should be working on those quick throws, those throws over the middle, dumping it off to the running back. But if you want to turn him into that kind of quarterback, like Brock Purdy, be a point guard, I don't know if I love that. Where are you if that's the tightrope with what's going on with Jalen Hurts? Where are you? Do you want him to turn into more of a?
No, I think he's too talented for that, and I also think he has a better arm, I think, than Brock Purdy, and the weapons they have are a little different than the 49ers weapons. McCaffrey is a unique weapon. Deebo Samuel. The Eagles have got a couple guys, and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, who are maybe we'll see if the 49ers get their problems with Ayuk, ironed out. Maybe we'll see more of this from their offense. But the Eagles are going to throw long more than the 49ers are, I think. I think that's more.
I think they should.
But
they did fall in love with it, so.
Yeah. I don't mean just down the sideline all the time. You can overdo that, but I think it's a different offense. I guess different personnel, different strengths. No, I don't want to see him be Brock Purdy. I think he's too multi-talented for that, and I think the people around him are different. Even with Saquon, I don't think you've got the same thing as the 49ers have in McCaffrey. I just don't think there is another one of those.
No. I'm with you. I get in trouble every day on this show for pointing out that
Johnny Mac.
And I don't have any, I think Saquon is a great addition.
So do I.
I'm not knocking that or anything, but it just isn't the same thing. He hasn't done that. Nobody's done that, since I think McCaffrey is kind of like Brian Westbrook 2.0, there haven't been very many. Marshall Faulk was like that, I guess.
LaDainian Tomlinson, I throw out there. I think Faulk, Tomlinson, and with all due respect, I think Brian was great locally, phenomenal, and I don't think Saquon's Brian Westbrook. But the three I always are Faulk, Tomlinson, Christian McCaffrey. And they're kind of above and beyond.
Yeah, and I think even if Saquon had that skill set, this isn't that's not this type of offense. That's not Jalen Hurts. That's not this offense. So even if he had McCaffrey's skill set, he's not using it that way. They're not going to use him that way at all in this offense. So I agree. Right. It's not the greatest comparison. But Les, let me ask you about we're on Jalen Hurts. I'll stay there for a minute. A lot of talk this week about the leadership now coming off the press conference, and then Ron Jaworski's talking about the leadership. How much stock do you put in that? You've been covering the NFL for a long time. Is it a whole lot of off-season nothing burgers, or is there something there with the quarterback?
Well, when they went to the Super Bowl, if you go back and look at what was said and written back then, he was the greatest leader of all time. Yeah. It was amazing what a wonderful leader he was. It was his strength. It was one of the best things about him was his leadership. And then when they started losing, all of a sudden he's not a good leader. I don't know. There's something there in terms of his tendency to kind of shut down, I think, when things are going bad, rather than I don't think he can't change his personality. I don't want him running around with a fake smile on his face, rah-rahing everybody because somebody told him he needed to do that. I don't think that's genuine. I don't think people get anything from that. But I do think he needs to think about in those situations. Okay, we're having a tough day. I'm coming to the sideline. I need to go over to this guy maybe and say something to him, that sort of thing. And I think he understands that. Even though his most recent public appearance was not what anybody wanted to really hear earlier in the offseason. He did have a session where he talked about, realizing that he needed to kind of think more about how he came across to his teammates during the games. That's the kind of leadership I'm really concerned about. I think whenever you lose, leadership becomes something people want to zero in on. I don't know that it changes that much. Really. The remarks were weird. And I know you guys have probably talked about that in depth, and I've written about
unfortunately.
More depth than I'd like to admit.
Here's my advice to Jalen would only be, just make the layup, dude. Just say, that was such an easy question to answer. And our buddy Martin Frank asked the question. And I can say this because Martin admitted it. It was a layup. It was a bunny. It was it was put on a tee for a home run. Just say he's doing a good job.
The only thing I can figure is that Jalen didn't hear the question that way, and we don't know what he heard.
That's true. Yeah.
In what I wrote about it, and I don't expect everybody to have read it, was on PHLY, and you have to subscribe to read it and all that. But as a reporter, one of the things I do when someone asks a question, I'm in my head just automatically formulating a response. Like, here's what I'm probably going to hear from this guy on this. But that's not, Jalen isn't a reporter.
Yeah.
And I've learned over the years that athletes don't always hear what we hear, that he's in a different perspective. He's in a different place. Maybe he knows that Nick is doing this through gritted teeth or something, maybe he's like,
I'm sure he does, by the way. I'm sure he does.
There's a million different things he could have meant. You're right. He should have had the aplomb at this point in his career to kind of come up with something a little less puzzling, but we don't know what the inside situation really is and how Jalen saw that question, what he thought he was being asked. One of the big, and I'm going to get myself in trouble here. One of the big things I have coming out of that is, so the Eagles have people whose job it is to smooth over these things. When Donovan McNabb said something off key, there was a guy, Rich Berg, who worked in the PR department back then.
Yeah.
Now at Temple, who, he would get Donovan and they would come up with, here's what Donovan really meant. We haven't heard anything from the Eagles. I don't know if they don't think this is important or if they can't, if they don't have that kind of clout with Jalen anymore. I have no idea, but I
think, and if you go back to your old colleague Jeff McMullen on his podcast reported that I believe is the key members of the Eagles organization, Jeffrey and Howie, I'll get myself in trouble, were disappointed was the word. Mm-hmm. And my take on that was, why wouldn't they be disappointed? You're leaving something, and I talked to somebody in the organization. I got the quote, unforced error, tennis, whatever you want to use. You're going away for 6 weeks, and you're leaving the speculation open-ended.
Yes.
Which is, again, the layup part. And I agree. And I think that was a very valid point that you said, Les. Not everybody has our perspective. And I think more of us have to understand that. But it's still a layup. A layup's a layup.
Yeah.
And your perspective or not, head coach and, Bob Lang and everybody else in Eagles PR, they prepared them. And that's why they're disappointed. They knew this question was coming about Nick. That's the whole genesis of this offseason. It's about him giving up an offense, which we all know he didn't want to give up. I'll say that. I'll get in trouble.
Yeah.
Nick loves his offense. He didn't want to give it up. He knew if he didn't give it up, you're in Doug Peterson territory where it's like, all right, you're going to get forced to give it up. And you can either agree to it or disagree. So I think that's the part where the Eagles, he was prepared, Les. Yeah. He was prepared for that question, and he didn't handle it.
No, he didn't. I just wonder if Jalen liked the offense as it was, because he was the 95% thing is a complaint. I mean, it's like,
that's how I saw it.
Running a whole damn new offense, maybe he just didn't like the play calling. Maybe he thought the offense was just fine the way it was. if they called a different sequence of plays, if they, stopped using the bubble screen 27 times a game, maybe he didn't really see a need to go with the whole new offense. I don't know. But it is
I think you're 100%. I think you're on to something. He's talked about continuity a couple times and about what he's been through in his career. And it's like he keeps changing and changing and changing. And I think, Tom, I go back to Tom Brady. He talked about how important continuity was and how you got to evolve off of that. So I think you're on to something there, Les. I think 100%.
And the 95% thing got some pushback. Howard Eskin, who years ago, when Andy was around, Howard was closer to the pulse than I think he is now. And I'm not criticizing Howard when I say that, but it's just a different era, a different group of people. But I think a lot of us still perceive that when Howard comes out strong on something Eagles related, that it's somebody in the front office or the coaching staff is bolstering that view. And Howard was like, is nowhere near 95%. I mean, I do think there's something going on there. You said terminology. I think that's probably a good explanation, but I don't think they wanted Jalen to come out and say the offense was 95%.
No, that's another
I don't think
part.
they think it is 95%.
And by the way, I'm the one who asked the question where he broke out the 95%. And I didn't ask that question last. I asked about ownership of the offense, and he took it. And Jalen's very intentional when he wants to be. And he took it in the direction he wanted to go. And he wanted it, I believe he wanted it out there, 95% new offense, because they had struggled so much in the spring. And he's trying to explain why. And by the way, I think that's a good reason why you are going to struggle. Interesting thing, tangent here with coaches. I've never understood, and they all do it. When you're coming into a new situation as a coach, Les, wouldn't you shift your terminology to what they long-term players? Isn't it easier for one person who in theory has a high football IQ than a bunch of guys to learn again and again and again? I've never so counterintuitive.
I've never thought about that. I on the surface, that makes a great deal of sense. I've never heard of anybody doing it, though. I mean,
no, nobody's ever. I'm not criticizing Kellen Moore. Nobody does it. I've just always thought it doesn't make sense to me. Like, you're the football guy. You're the football IQ guy. Shouldn't it be easier to you?
I guess if you had a play where every detail was the same and you just used a different term, but maybe there's subtle differences that,
Yeah, I'm sure there's a reason. I'm just trying to figure it out. But yeah, overall, and at Les Bowen, again, make sure you follow Les. Tremendous follow on x.com. You can read him at PHLY. Subscribe to read Les because he's that good. The offense as a whole, we just kind of talked about. I look, Nick's going to say the right things. If you put a gun to my head, I'm going to tell you he didn't want to give up the offense.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
Can this succeed? We're both stipulating that. Can this succeed when you have a guy being essentially, even though it wasn't, he was politically savvy enough, this is how I describe it, Les, to understand what was coming. So he got ahead of it. And he was proactive. And I think he did a good job as far as trying to forge a path to 2025. Because if you think about it, Kevin Patullo's still here. Jamal Singleton's still here. Stout's obviously still here. Aaron Moorhead's still here. Most of his guys are still here on the offensive side. And if they're really successful, hey, Kellen Moore goes and he's a head coach somewhere and Nick Sirianni's back in full control.
Right.
So I think he was very politically savvy in how he did it. But from my perspective, he didn't want to give it up. Can that succeed?
It can, but it's unwieldy. And there's going to be flashpoints. And it's going to be something we're going to be scrutinizing anytime there's a problem or a loss or any kind of if Nick is shown on the sideline, conferring with Kellen Moore, and Nick's like animated, I foresee all kinds of ways this can go. It can work. I mean, there's a lot of talent, as you said here. Yeah. Will it work? That and Hurts are the two. All the work they've done on the defense this offseason is wonderful. It doesn't mean a darn thing if those two things. It's all about Jalen Hurts, and it's about the Sirianni as overseer of an offense that isn't his, and how Kellen Moore's offense works. That's 1 and 1A for whether the Eagles are really good this year. The defense can be whatever it wants if those two things are really, really successful, and if those two things don't work as planned, it kind of doesn't matter how good the defense is. If the defense can be real good and the team still won't win the Super Bowl, in my view, I think those are the two big questions: Jalen Hurts and the Sirianni Moore, equation are going to define the season.
Yeah, and if it was a public display of disapproval from the quarterback in a way and in his comments, it's tough to reach the pinnacle of what you can be, especially with all this talent on the offense. So definitely a good storyline, something we'll be watching all season long. Les, thanks for joining the show today, man. You're great as always. Make sure everybody follows him on Twitter. Read all his work at PHLY and LesBowensJohn.com. Les, thanks for joining the show, man.
Thank you, guys. Zander, pick me up one of those cinnamon.
Anything you want, Les. Shoot me the text, the email. I'll be over right after the show ends. Okay. I'll drop it off for you.
Thanks,
Les. Take care, guys.
Thank you, Les. There's Les Bowen joining us on Birds 365. Good stuff from Les Bowen. Internet's holding good here at Panera over here. So
Panera Bread Studios. Get the sponsor. Yeah. How about that?
I got to go and talk to the manager right after this. I mean, they're getting a bunch of play from this show, so I'll go and talk to them, see if we can get a Panera sponsor out of it. Johnny Mac, anything I can pick you up? A little sandwich, a little coffee. I'll bring it over to you too.
Yeah, I mean, my wife is a big fan of Panera. I'm usually, when she wants something, I'm usually more of I don't want to criticize the potential sponsor. It's a little bit too fancy for me. Too much fancy stuff. I need more straight ahead.
You're like a Dunkin' guy. I'm a Dunkin' guy, Johnny. I'm not a Panera guy, but I went and assessed the Dunkin' this morning. Wasn't the right spot for the show. It didn't have the right studio feel.
Well, so Panera's classier, so I'm picking myself back up. So that's where you have it. Yeah, I'm not as classy as my wife. No,
so for anybody that missed the start of the show, I had a major power outage, so bunch of trees down, so that's where I'm doing the show from today. Let's get to our commercial break. Johnny Mac and I still have an hour left to play, so I'll run some things by Johnny Mac. We'll talk about some Isaiah Rodgers comments.
Bob Roach was supposed to be here, by the way. I want to get that in, but he had to cover the Sixers draft, so I'm going to go on a Sixers draft.
Oh God, we're going to hit that. I know it's Birds 365, but we got to address. We got to address like for 5 minutes here this draft pick that the Sixers made. So we'll do that next, coming up here on Birds 365. Stay tuned, everybody.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your green house? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
How about SIXERS, Sixers, coming back? Johnny Mac, what's your first impression of that draft pick? Let's get it out of the way before we dive into our Eagles segments for hour number 2. What'd you think of this Sixers move last night in the NBA draft?
Well, it's more than that. Obviously, they have to do some significant building of that roster, and they haven't gotten off to a great start. Anything you hear about them trying to get the kid from the Knicks, that didn't work out. The Knicks certainly, the trade, the NBA's turned into this weird. They gave up 6 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges. I'm like, what is that league even doing? Nobody values it's almost the exact opposite. Nobody values first round picks, at least unless they're in the top 10. I'd even argue top 5. Everything else is a crapshoot. Nobody believes in player development. Yet you see players develop all the time. So I don't understand what that league's doing in general. I don't know much about the kid other than evidently he's got tremendous TikTok game. So if that helps. And he's a good shooter, which is never a bad thing in the modern NBA. And maybe it works out, but yeah, it's the NBA draft though. And when I covered the league, it was one of my biggest criticisms. They've made that thing unwatchable because you can't announce the trades. It's like, why? It's the easiest fix in the world.
I know. You're right.
Just get together with the NBA Players Association and say, look, this is a disaster. I saw a clip with they're talking about Minnesota ended up trading the Timberwolves, and I forget the player's name if anybody wants to drop it in the chat. He gets drafted by San Antonio, and they're talking about his fit in San Antonio. They're going on and on and on for 3 minutes. In the last 10 seconds, oh, by the way, Woj says he's getting traded to the Timberwolves. It's like, what
it's
are you
weird.
doing
You're right.
here?
There's like no continuity when you watch the draft. It's terrible.
Yeah, it's awful television. And that's what it's all about, is making it entertaining for the fans. So that draft could be so much more than it is, with the easiest fix in human history, and they refuse to fix it. And I don't get it. But the Sixers are the Sixers, and I hope the kid turns into something, but I don't think he's coming to a good organization. Sorry, Dave Scheller. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think it's even, Daryl Morey is just, I think he might be the most overrated general manager in all of professional sports. This guy is like, everybody talks about him like he's done nothing. He's traded for Harden everywhere he's gone. That's it. Like I don't like what has he done? And the Sixers have gotten nowhere closer to the NBA title since he has been
they've
here.
gotten farther away.
Yeah, they've
clearly.
gone further away. It's an absolute joke. And then, I mean, geez, prepare your hate comments for me in the comments. And you know what? I don't even care to draft a guy like that. I mean, you already have Tyrese Maxey. He's a 6'2" guard. I know he can shoot the ball. That's great. Spread the floor. I mean, the guy that went to pick after him, Dalton Knecht, he's the perfect player to put on the wing, and he's a knockdown shooter. And you passed up on him for a fingernail polish wear, which whatever. I don't care. I mean, if he's going to play good, but
you gotta
he's crying out there. He's TikTok dancing. I'm like, is this guy built for? Look, I'm not criticizing the guy, right? He can do whatever he wants, but I'm analyzing it from a sports perspective. You need to play in a league of grown men who are not going to take any punches. They're not going to play pansy with you. And when you're dancing around and you're crying like a little cispot and you're doing all these things, I just don't know if you're cut out to play in a league of grown men that are the pinnacle of athletes on the planet. You can criticize me for that take. I don't really care. I don't see it. I don't see it with the guy. I don't see it at all. He got drafted. I'm watching it with my father, and I'm like, Krause, I don't know about this guy. I don't like him. My early returns are not good on this guy. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully he does something, but geez, I did not like the pick at all, Johnny Mac.
Yeah, I mean, I don't watch enough college basketball anymore to really talk about the kid and his spit. I mean, I do know if you can shoot, it's going to be helpful in the modern NBA. And
Too small,
yeah,
you already have Maxey. That's what I don't get.
That hurts. Shoot. That hurts more on the defensive end, certainly. But when you talk about the Dalton Knecht
Knecht or whatever his name is, he's good, man. I liked him.
Can he play defense? I don't know.
No, but I think he was just a better fit for the roster. I mean, if you look at the two pieces that aren't going anywhere on the team, it's Maxey and it's Embiid. Instead you could have gotten a guy, a forward right in the middle of them that can knock down he's your replacement for Tobias Harris. Instead, we took a clone of Tyrese Maxey in a way who's going to be off ball.
Well, if he's a clone of Tyrese Maxey, that's a home run. But I don't.
What I mean. I mean that the spacing of the floor.
I mean, you kind of figured out if Morey thinks he's a better player, and clearly he does, and he turns out to be a better player, you'll figure it out. If they're similar, if Knecht is better, then you start talking about fit, and maybe he's a better fit. But if he thinks, and I know he mentioned. And all GMs mentioned he was top 10 on our board. I know he mentioned that. If that's true, if they got him weighted way ahead of him, I got no problem. Even though there's a little bit of a redundancy, you always take the best player. Always take the best player.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, my point is I'm not sure if he was the best player, and then you add in the fit. You're right though. If he can shoot, I mean, it'll spread. It'll help out. But solely off feel for me. I don't like the pick.
Well, the TikTok stuff and whatever. Hopefully he matures. I mean, we're talking about very young people here. And, some people mature quickly. Some people don't. Not to say it's, the worst thing in the world. He's not doing anything wrong.
No, I'm not saying he's doing anything wrong. I'm just questioning if that's a guy that's built to have great
People
success.
People will talk trash to you, though, so be prepared for that. Players will talk trash to you. So we'll see if he can handle it, basically.
Makes me grateful to have Jalen Hurts here as the quarterback in Philadelphia. For all the talk about Jalen, I will take Jalen's demeanor and stoicism over that all day. I can get criticized for it. I'm all right with that. Johnny Mac, let's move into some Eagles topics. I want to start with AJ Brown's comments on Isaiah Rodgers. He spoke pretty highly of him. And the other guy that AJ spoke highly of in the past, who you always point to, is Keely Ringo. Well, AJ Brown's liking what he's seeing from Isaiah Rodgers, says he has a chance to have a big impact on the team.
That was my question too. Everybody's aggregating now all of a sudden AJ talking about Isaiah Rodgers. Isaiah was great in the spring. But I go back to Christian Parker. The one concern I have with Isaiah Rodgers, when he did play in Indianapolis, he wasn't a great tackler. He had a big missed tackle percentage for the, advanced stats and all that kind of stuff. And, Christian Parker, it was notable to me. He's the Eagles' new secondary coach. He said, basically, he's doing a good job. All the platitudes you want. And then he said, but there's still a long way to go. And I think he's talking about when the pads come on, we'll see if he can handle the physical part of the game. I think the spring is made for somebody like Isaiah Rodgers. He's a 4.31 guy. He's very fast. He's going to look good in pajamas because he's very athletic. And I think that the whole thing with him is going to be, can he hold up and run support? Can he be physical? And that's what we're going to see. And that's going to determine basically three guys are fighting for the spot. Kaylee Ringo, Isaiah Rodgers, and Quinyon Mitchell. I don't think James Bradbury is going to be here, and even if he is, for some strange reason, evidently they're going to try him at safety. We'll see if that ever pans out. But I think it's going to be between those three guys, and obviously long term they want Mitchell to win the job, and that's where they're going. But I think that's going to determine when the pads come on. You're going to hear about somebody separating. And I've already seen Kaylee, and he's pretty physical for a young player. And I think that's only going to continue as he gets more experience. So we'll have to see about Isaiah Rodgers. We've seen at the pro level, at least in Indianapolis, not as physical. And we'll see Quinyon Mitchell when he gets here to see how he looks with pads on.
Yeah, we'll see what they're able to do. I'm excited for the idea of Isaiah Rodgers, but I brought this up the other day when we were talking about this on the National Football Show, Dan Silio and I. And my problem with it is I just don't see the future here with him. And I know you can't think too much about the future. That's Howie's job, but he's a young guy. Like, you have Quinyon, you have Cooper, you have Keeley, you have all these young dudes. It's almost a numbers game where it's like, are they going to prioritize Isaiah Rodgers now over one of their young draft picks? I think the Eagles would prefer to go with their young draft picks, even if they might not be as polished as he is right now. And that's where that's where the idea that you had of the trade is like, it makes sense to me. You bought the guy, and you're going to sell him
down that route.
Well, I'm not saying that they're going to do that. I'm just saying from a business perspective, it makes sense. You bought the guy low, you're going to sell him high.
I mean, Quinyon Mitchell's going to be a starting corner on this team by 2025, and period, end of sentence. I mean, that's where they're going. And how quickly it gets there. Now, remember, by 2025, you may have two open corner spots. So it might be, and I think if we're giving some truth serum to Vic Fangio, he'd prefer it to be Quinyon Mitchell and Kaylee Ringo and or Cooper DeJean as the two starters. So yeah, your point to the Eagles defaulting or wanting to default to certain players is certainly true, and that happens in every NFL city. But if Isaiah gets a chance and he plays well, nobody's taking him off the field. That's the one thing, a lot of Brock Purdy talk. Always too much Brock Purdy talk on this show because of Jody but he's turned into a very good quarterback.
Yeah.
They didn't want Brock Purdy to be the starting quarterback. That's all revisionist history. They didn't want him anywhere near the starting lineup. They wanted Trey Lance to be the starting quarterback. It didn't work out. And Brock Purdy got a chance through injuries to get on the field, and he performed to a level they're not taking him off the field. So that's what the opportunity playing time affords. If you get on the field, if you get that opportunity and you just play lights out, nobody's taking you off the field. Nobody's taking you off the field. Another quarterback, because I thought last year, honestly, in training camp or even early in the season, I think if Brock Purdy faltered, Kyle Shanahan would have went to Sam Darnold. He would have went to Sam Darnold. And I think this year you see it in Minnesota with Sam Darnold and J.J. McCarthy. Sam Darnold's going to start week 1. And if he plays like Brock Purdy, which I don't expect to happen, but, he's got a lot of skill position talent out there. If he plays like that, he's not coming off the field. He's not. So it gives you an opportunity. It might be a small opportunity. There's not margin for error like a first-round pick, or in the case of Sam, he was a first-round pick, but that was with a different team, not with a new team. With the Eagles, Quinyon Mitchell is afforded more opportunities than Isaiah Rodgers or even Keely Ringo. And then it goes down. Cooper DeJean, more opportunities than Keely Ringo. Keely Ringo, more opportunities than Isaiah Rodgers. Isaiah's at the bottom of that pecking order.
He definitely is, but Twiz puts it in here. It's a good point where I'll put it up because he dropped the F-bomb, but that's all right. I mean, he says, who wants to look dumb after they gave up first 3-round picks, but they made the right decision, and I commend them for that. Screw the optics. The best player should play. I wish the NFL world existed solely like that, but it doesn't. It's not, it's not a meritocracy fully, and that's just the way it's going to be. So that's where I bring into the business element of it, where I wonder about what they'll do at that position. But look, I think it's a good problem to have. But as you always say, the word problem exists in that, and we'll see how they address it. But Howie's definitely going to do something. It'll be interesting to see what he does with these guys, especially going into this year. I mean, I know you have Slay, but who rides the bench? Who plays? Who, do they move somebody somewhere? Is Cooper DeJean going to be a safety? I don't see that, but a lot of people are speculating it simply because of how many people are in the cornerback room. We'll see what they're going to do at the cornerback position. It should be interesting going into training camp.
Yeah, and I kind of, it's not a full-fledged meritocracy, but there is an opportunity if you get a chance. And again, if you perform, but when you start talking about first-round picks, they have more rope. It's just the way it is, not only in Philadelphia, everywhere else. And they will get more opportunities where if you're a 6th-round pick, Jason Kelce turned into Jason Kelce. But guess what? If he showed up and he performed really poorly in his rookie season, or, even early in his career, they would have pulled the plug. That's, whereas guys like Derek Barnett and Jalen Reagor got chance after chance after chance after chance to prove that they were deserving of being first-round picks. Again, not just Philadelphia, everywhere. That's the way the league is.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what they end up doing and how it all plays out for the Eagles. What about the safety position, Johnny Mac? I know we talk about Reed Blankenship, but I have a feeling he could have a big year this year. I mean, I know we brought back C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who's a big element and had some real juice when he was here in Philly. He was obviously the big play guy, had some interceptions. I'm concerned about the injuries, but can't legislate injuries. I'm not going to sit here and worry about that right now. In June, we'll see how many games he ends up playing, but I think he'll be a big impact, and I think he's going to make Reed Blankenship better. But what do you think about the safety position and where we are heading into training camp? A lot of people have been speculating they might add to the room.
Yeah. Sure. Oh, if I see another Justin Simmons story, I'm going to.
Yeah, they're everywhere, man. They're everywhere.
I think the Eagles think more of Reed Blankenship than most of their fans do, but we'll see. I mean, one thing Adam Schefter was on 97.5, and I'm not picking on Adam because Adam's phenomenal, but it's just the way he phrased it, and he's speaking extemporaneously. I'm sure he wasn't, I'm sure he just misspoke a little bit, but what he said is, I haven't heard that the Eagles have looked into Justin Simmons because they seem to be, well, they seem to have a lot of confidence in Reed Blankenship. And I've said pretty consistently, you're not bringing in Justin Simmons to be a backup. So if he's not going to be a starter, you're not interested. And that's where the Eagles seem to be right now. So what Schefter said is, I haven't heard that they are interested, but what is going to happen? Everybody's going to come back from their vacation and they're going to start taking a look and they're going to be like, wow, I didn't realize that Justin Simmons is still out there. And I'm like, I mean, there's a lot of bad organizations in the NFL but does anybody believe that they're not aware that Justin Simmons is out there? I mean, from the worst or whoever you think whether it's Carolina or the Jets, you think they're not aware that Justin Simmons is out there? I mean, the Eagles will wait if they have an injury. I'm sure that he'll be the first call and all that kind of stuff. But again, he's not going to be a backup. You're not bringing in Justin Simmons to be a backup. And part of his still being out there might have to do with Justin himself. I don't know him, but he might say, I don't want
waiting, right?
Yeah. I don't want to deal with off-season crap. I don't need it. And he might be waiting to the start of camp or a week before camp. But I think the Eagles believe in Reed Blankenship, and they're not going to bring him in as a backup.
How many are they going to keep, though, in the room, Johnny Mac? I mean, they have 3 people you got Reed, you got CJ, and you got Sidney Brown. I know they floated James Bradbury. I'm not buying that as a realistic 4th guy. They're going to keep.
No, either am I. I think they're trying to, and this is just speculation. We'll see how the summer and injuries start to happen. They changed the IR rules again, where you can put 2 people on IR from in the initial cut to 53, and they can be brought back. Before, you had to be on the original 53 to be brought back. So that gives them more wiggle room. But the point is, they want to keep a bunch of these young corners. And right now, if you look at it from just a traditional standpoint, well, you need 4 safeties. So Mekhi Gardner's got to make the team, or Tristan McCullum's got to make the team as the 4th safety. Then you're going to have to cut Josh Jobe, or you're going to have to cut Eli Ricks. But because of Avonte Maddox and his versatility, his ability to play the position, I think it gives you an extra body in the secondary to work with, that he can play both positions and be one of the backup safeties, and that will enable you to keep another one of those young corners. I think that's what Howie is thinking, or at least keep them without getting them through waivers. So if you cut a guy and want to bring him back to the practice squad, you have to get him through waivers. And they were concerned about losing Eli Ricks last year.
Right.
They probably would have gotten him through waivers. Nobody will ever know. They'll probably get, whether it's Josh Jobe, they could probably get him through waivers. Although, if somebody needs a special teams player, maybe that's not the case. So sometimes you don't want to take that risk.
Yeah, we'll see what they end up doing at the room. I mean, Pete Nathan says, why not make Cooper DeJean a safety? He's a better safety than a corner. Pete, I love you, brother. Thank you for tuning in. But what makes you think that at all? I mean, he didn't play safety at all in college. He was scouted as an outside cornerback. The Eagles have openly said they scouted him as an outside cornerback, not quarterback. Why would they move a guy that they drafted and at 40 overall to be an outside cornerback into a safety? It just doesn't make sense to me. I just don't. That doesn't add up. I don't see them doing that or going that route at all. So it's a little bit of
everything about everything. It's ironic. Everything about Cooper is projection, except outside cornerback. He moved around a little bit at Iowa, but very few snaps. Almost over 90% were at outside corner.
I think he can be an outside cornerback in the NFL. I really do. I mean,
well, the Eagles
I'm not a race guy. I don't
know.
It does seem like it's because he's a white dude and he can't, he's not going to play on the outside. I don't want to make it about that, but that's always an element in the discussion.
Well, you got to ask that question, but and the ironic part is Cooper's, probably one of the best athletes on the team. He's just a ridiculous athlete. Google his basketball tape if you want to see the explosion off the floor. He's 6 foot and see the explosion and how easily he dunks. He's got, he ran a 4.42. He's got 38.5-inch vertical. He's a phenomenal athlete. Athleticism isn't the problem with Cooper. But yeah, there's some, because there's not a lot of white corners. There's obviously some assumptions that are probably unfair. And everybody wants to move him inside. And that's where I think he's going to start. But I think he's going to start inside, but more at slot, not at safety. Because they want to get him on the field. And they have too many outside corners to get him on the field at outside corner. Long term, again, I think the plan is Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean as your two outside corners. And I don't know if the Eagles were public with they scout him as an outside corner. I didn't hear that. If I did, I don't know. But I was told that they scouted him strictly as an outside corner. And why wouldn't they? Because he played outside corner.
Yeah.
So anything else is a complete projection. But when I say that, like Howie Roseman signed Zach Bowen to be a hook or a flat defender in Vic Fangio's scheme. And Vic got a look at him and said, no, I think he's an all-ball linebacker. So once you hand it off to the coaching staff uses the players how they want to use the players. So if Vic says,
I don't know, Johnny Mac. I don't know about that. If that's true for Cooper, I think that's Jeffrey Lurie is calling the shots on Cooper DeJean.
Yeah, Jeffrey doesn't.
No, I'm not saying calling the shots. I'm just saying I don't think they're gonna. He's not going anywhere. Yeah,
I nobody's telling Vic what to do as far as how he utilizes the players. So, and remember, when Avonte Maddox was a rookie, nobody thought he was going to play safety. Nobody. And the Eagles had a bunch of injuries. And Jim Schwartz looked at what he had and said, this guy's best equipped to play safety. And he played safety. And he held up okay. It was a little bit overrated. He didn't play great. But he held up okay. So injuries can factor into it as well. But right now, their forced safety would be Avonte Maddox, unless they add Justin Simmons or Eddie Jackson, and you get the 17th aggregation story. Oh, are the Eagles interested in Justin Simmons?
What about slot corner then? If they move, let's just say they play Avonte at safety, or they move him there for the time, for now. You think Cooper would slot in as a slot? You think
I think he might be the starting slot corner in week 1. I think that's the hope. I won't call it a plan. They want to get him on the field, and that's the easiest place to get him on the field. And if that's the case, Avonte becomes the backup slot and the backup safety. And that's how they would handle it. But I think that's the most likely spot that Cooper DeJean gets on the field first for the Philadelphia Eagles slot corner.
Our guy Pete Nathan in the chat brings up Eddie Jackson. I don't like the Justin Simmons as much. What do you think of Eddie Jackson as a guy that,
Same thing. I he's still out there. He's got a history with Vic. He's not going to be brought in as a backup. So, to be a backup safety, you got to help on special teams. And they're not going to bring a veteran, big name guy to be a backup safety. If they need a starting safety, they will entertain both names. And obviously, Vic would be comfortable with both names. But, they've been out there for a very long time. And until there's some evidence that the Eagles don't believe in Reed Blankenship, and I've seen no evidence of that, I don't think you're going to see either one of them here.
Let's get our super chat from James Carver. James, thank you, brother. 1999. We appreciate that very much, everybody in the chat. We appreciate you all being here this morning on this June edition. Dog days of summer, everybody. We are getting through them. Football season will be here before you know it. James Carver says, I think like Isaiah Rodgers' own answer about playing slot, specifically that a slot has to have ability and willingness to hit the opposite side, A-gap, and run protection. And that's not what Isaiah Rodgers does. But Cooper is willing to hit and tackle. That's a good point in terms of, the physicality. Isaiah, that's something you brought up. Isaiah struggles with that. What do you have to respond there to James, Johnny Mac?
Yeah, run fits is a big deal for the inside corner. It's one of the reasons why Avonte Maddox has been not the most durable player in the world, because he's 5'9", 180, and he plays like he's 210. He's really physical. He throws his body around, and that's hurt him at times. But yeah, you got to be a good run support player to be a good slot corner. And that's a big part of it. And yeah, I mean, the projections of Cooper is very versatile. And Christian Parker talked about this, is that he can play anywhere basically in the secondary because he's such a high IQ player. But again, everything's a projection at this point. Now, the Eagles started him out in the slot, and we'll learn a lot more when the pads come on. But in theory, yeah, I mean, he's always shown the willingness to tackle, and that's why they're projecting him right there to be his main position, at least early in his career.
Good answer there from Johnny Mac. James, thank you, brother, for the super chat. We appreciate that very much. Johnny Mac will hit a timeout, and then we'll come back. We got about 30 minutes left to go in the show today. I want to talk to Nick Sirianni and see, what you think of him and how much he's going to have to do with the success or lack thereof of the Eagles this year. So we'll do that next. I'm going to welcome and thank everybody for being here this morning. A lot of good viewership here on June 27th. We appreciate it. I know it's the dog days of summer. For those who missed the start of the show, I'm doing it from Panera Bread today. Shout out to Panera. I'll give him a little show on the cup. Got
there
the
we
coffee
go.
cup.
Yeah.
Not the greatest coffee. Sorry, Panera. But
whoa! Well,
Yeah,
come on, you're hurting. Was that a green cup? It showed up too.
It's a green cup, so maybe it does fit on Birds 365, and it will become the best coffee I've ever had if the manager here is willing to have the conversation after the show. But I am doing it from here today. We had a tree fall in the neighborhood bad, and it took out the entire power line. I spoke with the marshal, and he's like, yeah, you might want to, hit the road, my friend. Your internet will not be back on by 8 a.m. So that's what I did. I moved on. 7 a.m. I was right here as they opened the doors, and here we are on Birds 365, a special Panera Bread episode, as Eduardo puts it. Appreciate that, Eduardo. Let's get their commercial break. 30 minutes left to go here on Birds 365. Stay tuned, everybody.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your green house? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction, go with trust,
Go Birds!
and go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to a Thursday edition of Birds 365, a Thursday Panera Bread edition of Birds 365. Johnny Mac, lot has been talked about. Nick Sirianni, Jalen Hurts, all that in the offseason, and that's what we do. I mean, we're getting through the dog days of summer. There's a lot of stuff we have to talk about. There's a lot of stuff we talk about probably way longer than we would like to talk about it, but we do it because it's June and we got to do the show for 2 hours every day. What do you think of Nick Sirianni coming into this year? What does he have to do for Nick specifically to have success this year for this football team with the offense out of his hands, the defense out of his hands?
Yeah, it talked about a little bit of that tightrope. I don't like the setup. I don't agree with it. I think, if you're keeping him, let him run the team as he sees fit. And I don't necessarily think that's the case, even though, look, I think it was on his sort of proactive nature to realize what was coming. So I don't think Jeffrey Lurie ever got to the point where he said, you have to do this, you have to do this, but he knew it was coming. So you get to the same spot. Doesn't matter how you get to the destination if you get to the destination.
Right.
And look, I would say shit or get off the pod. I mean, if he's the head coach, let him be the head coach the way he wants to be the head coach. So I don't like that nature of it. Now, the team has so much talent, they might overcome all of this. And if they do, I think Nick's going to be fine. But yeah, I don't think it's shaping up well for him. I mean, you have stages of Bum Phillips had that famous quote, there's two kinds of coaches, them that's hired and them that's fired. There's two everybody's hired to be fired. Everybody's got a shelf life. Andy Reid had a shelf life here. Believe it or not, he's got a shelf life in Kansas City. Bill Belichick had a shelf life in New England, even after all the accomplishments. And he's not the head coach there anymore. Everybody's got a shelf life. Nick is past the scapegoating phase where he had the layered, all right, we can blame this on Brian Johnson. We can blame this on Sean Desai. Now that's been removed. Now he's on the clock, so to speak. And if this team fails, don't make the playoffs, one and done, even if you make the playoffs and it's another embarrassing performance, he's going to be out. Now, if they are tremendous and they go back to the Super Bowl, I think that's where I bring up the political nature, the savviness of what he did. He created a bigger path for himself to return in 2025 and beyond by doing what he did. But you have to be successful. You have to be successful. And if they're successful, whether that means getting to the Super Bowl again, obviously you want to win it. And if they win it, yeah, he's the head coach. And he's got sort of a new cycle he'll be back into firm footing, firm ground, where moving forward from there, he'll have another layer of scapegoating before he gets on the clock. The whole thing will start over.
Right.
And Kellen Moore will probably be a head coach somewhere else.
I don't think groom is the right word, but for the lack of a better word, I'm going to use it in this scenario. Do you think in a way the Eagles are, and it's not just the Eagles, but Nick too, they're grooming Nick to kind of be their perfect head coach? And what I mean by that is they like power, and that's okay. They own the team, and Jeffrey's allowed to do what he wants. It's his team, it's his toy. He's allowed to do what he wants, but that's what they didn't like about Doug, right? I mean, he wanted to call some of his own shots. You think in a way they're kind of grooming Nick to be that perfect guy who's the head coach? He speaks for the front office. He does what the front office asks of him. He wins games. He keeps the team relevant, and he answers the call that the front office has to make. Do you think that's a valid point, or is that thinking too deep or too far ahead?
I think it's a little bit too deep. I think this one is simple. And, typically when I talk about the Eagles, they're a little bit more open-minded and more forward-thinking than most NFL organizations. But in the case of coaches, they're like everybody else. They're no different. They have a hard time dealing with criticism and dealing with the hits you take from that perspective. And they jump quickly, probably even more quickly if you want to,
Yeah. Jeffrey Lurie he's not a waiter. He does not wait around on players, on coaches, on anything. And I think that's a good thing, honestly.
It could be bad because
I'm a big
continuity guy. You have to understand also it's cyclical. Because it's more talent driven than coaching. That's where I think the Eagles are too unrealistic about coaching. It's a talent driven sport. Coaching is more important in football than any other major sport. I'll agree with that, but still.
I think basketball, it's bigger than, but you're right. That's a star-driven league. There's not as many people in the court. I mean, I see what you're saying for sure.
It's driven by talent. It's still driven by talent. You can't win without talent. You're seeing it. You've seen it with Andy Reid. He's had bad seasons. Not a bad coach. He's had bad seasons. You've seen it with Bill Belichick. Not a bad coach. He's had bad seasons. Because if you don't have the talent, you have a ceiling, to put it mildly. And that's why I said the definition to me of great coaching is getting the most out of what you have, not winning the Super Bowl every year, because that's unrealistic. The Eagles have significant talent, so they should be in a position to where they certainly should make the playoffs, and you could argue they should make a somewhat of a deep run. Whatever that is to each individual person. But the default setting of it's always the coach's fault is incorrect. And I get it from a fan perspective because they don't want to insult their own players. I mean, that's just natural. And that's not just Philadelphia, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
They don't want to insult the players. They don't want to insult their favorite players. But from an organizational perspective, no, you got to be smarter than that. And you can't just be run of the mill. And I think, it's one guy, basically. It's not Howie. It's not it's Jeffrey. But it's his team. He can do what he wants, as you said.
20 minutes left to play, 18 minutes left to play here on Birds 365. I want to check in with some chatters real quick. Got a good question here for you, Johnny Mac. Before I do that, Eduardo says, Zander talking to the Marshal has to be the whitest thing I've heard today, which is a classic comment from Eduardo. Good stuff there, Eduardo. Chad Crawford, though, Johnny Mac. Thanks, Chad, for being here. Appreciate it, brother. I don't know if I've ever seen your name in the chat. If you're a new listener, let us know. We appreciate your being here and dropping a comment. John, are you concerned that Kellen has never worked with RPO?
No, I don't think that's the case. They didn't do it dramatic. I know Justin Herbert did it a little bit, just because of his history in college and things like that. Now it's a different style because obviously he's not the threat to pull it. I think people sort of conflate the actual RPO of being a threat with the mechanics of the RPO. Like it's pretty much a staple of every offense now, and it's really just a different way to play action, which Kellen's very big on play action. My bigger concern is I don't want Kellen Moore turning Jalen Hurts into a traditional play action quarterback. In other words, under center,
that would be worst case scenario, I think. I mean, that would be our biggest fear, basically, is to take Jalen Hurts and just make him completely something different.
Yeah, and I don't think he will. I think he's smart enough. So from his standpoint, his traditional play action mechanics have to turn into RPO play action mechanics, if that makes sense. So instead of using that, the quarterback's going to turn his back from the center, and he's going to be under center, that's got to be replaced by he's in the gun. Maybe it looks like an RPO mechanically, but it really isn't. It's called a pass. So from that standpoint, I think that's where he has to, and he's smart enough to understand that, I think. But
I agree. I mean, if you're a good offensive coordinator, you're smart enough to understand that. If you don't understand that, then you might not be that great of an offensive coordinator. But I think Kellen Moore is going to be just fine. I think he's going to do a good job here in Philadelphia and play to Jalen Hurts' strength. That's my gut feeling. I don't know. We'll see how he does, but that is my gut feeling about him, honestly. Let's go to Mr. Perez. Zander and John, how do you feel about Lane Johnson saying the offense is the same, just some different things with Kellen Moore, but he feels like we will be better because Hurts is being more vocal? Mr. Perez, thanks for checking in, brother. We appreciate your comment. We did hit it a little bit in the open about Lane Johnson. Johnny Mac, what did you make of that? I thought that was interesting when you talk about the 95% new. I mean, it's kind of been disproven a little bit. I guess, we took that number and ran with it like it was, under oath. It seemed like it was a little bit of an embellishment from Hurts.
Well, no, he was talking about he was talking about terminology. I believe it's new 95% terminology, which we talked about. It's from his standpoint, what Nick had tried to scale back and said, look, everybody has the same staples in the NFL. You're going to be running a lot of the same plays. So no, it's not 95% new from that perspective. So I think that's the disconnect. I think both were telling the truth. Will they be better because Jalen is more vocal? No. Will they be better because Jalen is executing better? Yes. If he's not turning it over as much, yes. No, I don't think the vocal stuff has anything to do with it, whether they're better or not. And the leadership standpoint of it is, look, you got to be a leader as a quarterback in the NFL. It's a position by definition that demands leadership, which can come in many different ways. And I'm in the camp of, I don't want him changing. He is who he is. I don't want him changing his personality. And he already proved he can win at a high level with his actual personality. So what has to improve is, and I would say first and foremost, is ball security, and then execution which is boring, and I get it, people don't want to hear it, but that's the truth. From Lane's perspective, nothing changes. Jason Kelce, I don't know, you can probably search it. He and Travis were talking about the playbook at one point this offseason on one of their podcasts. And Jason, he hasn't looked at a playbook in 10 years. Nothing changes for him. It's an offensive lineman. It's pass pro, inside zone, outside zone. That's what he does. Same thing with Lane. Jordan talked about this too, Jordan Mailata. I can't tell you about routes. And Travis said that on the podcast. Things change for him all the time. and they certainly changed for the quarterback. For the offensive lineman, no. And Jason was laughing about it. Has not picked up a playbook in 10 years. And he's telling the truth.
Yeah, pretty crazy stuff from Jason Kelce. For anybody that missed it earlier in the show, we did talk about Kelce's big Sea Isle bash. I was waiting to see if anybody in the chat said they were down there. I didn't see anybody. I think last year when he did this, I don't know if it was on Sports Take or one of our shows last year. I thought somebody was in the chat talking about being down there and watching him chug beers and the whole 9 yards. Jason, he is really a character though, Johnny Mac, Jason Kelce. It's amazing the evolution of him and how he's really come into his own. Not that he always wasn't, but I think it's more prominent now. It's more on display now, and it really is a sight to see. It's pretty cool to watch Jason Kelce. So pretty cool stuff, but we did talk about that in the open. Anybody else has some good comments in the chat? We will take a couple more questions. We only got about 10 minutes left to play, or about 11 or 12 minutes left to play. You're on Birds 365. Johnny Mac, if it all goes well, how good can this offense be this year?
Could be the best offense in football if everything clicks. But again, it won't have to do with play calling. And Kellen Moore has said this himself, when he asked, what's the most important thing? He said, clean operation. It'll be about execution. It'll be about doing what you're supposed to do on a particular play. Remember, they were 8th in the NFL last season. And if you take away the turnover differential between 2023 and 2022, you're probably very similar. In certain situational aspects, third down, fourth down being most notable. They were better last year than they were the year before. They have so much talent on offense. The ceiling is probably number 1 in the NFL. The floor is probably where they were last year, 8th or 9th, somewhere in that range. But they have too much talent to be a bad offense over a 17-game schedule.
Too good. I mean, I know we're kind of wired doing this show. You have to think of things to constantly talk about, and you can't just say every day, "Hey, we're going to be the best team in the league." Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. So he can't really do that. But when I do sit back and I analyze it, I'm like, this team is so good on offense. They have so many players, so many things. I mean, it's hard to fail. That's why that's what I always go back to too about 23. Not to beat the dead horse of the past, but like something must have happened inside the locker room. Like that team was another team that was stacked all throughout the roster, and you just wonder how they failed. And I just don't see it happening again. I think the team is too good.
Well, one of the things, and that's where. That's where I think the focus should be on Jalen Hurts, not leadership. How is he evolving at being that handler of the offense? How is he evolving? Because I saw it again today. Brian Johnson called 37 bubble screens. No, he did not. The bubble screen was their default setting when you have the math equation and the number says, and the quarterback's not comfortable realizing where the blitz is coming from, or not trusting, or not communicating to the wide receiver about where they need to be or about where they have to switch the play, and you simply just throw it out to the bubble screen. Nobody's calling the bubble screen. Brian Johnson's not. Occasionally, once in a blue moon, you might say, and Shane used to do this all the time. Yeah, numbers really look good. And back when they had Zach Pascal, somebody who could actually block, they might try it, but nobody's the problem with the bubble screen, and anybody who watches this show knows I'm on board with you. It's the most unaesthetic, ugliest play in football. I wish it was banned. It's so ugly. But they're not calling it all that time. That was their default setting for the blitz, which is awful. But the quarterback, blame the coaching staff, if you want, but here's where you should blame the coaching staff for not teaching the quarterback and getting him up to speed to be able to handle that better than just with a bubble screen. So the teaching part of it, have at it. They're not calling bubble screen after bubble screen after bubble screen. It's one of the worst narratives there is. It really is.
Agreed. Hurts is the big question coming into this year. I'm going to go to Richard Natinsky, another guy. I don't know if I've ever seen you in here, Richard. We appreciate you being here without a doubt. So if you are new, just tell me in the comments. I like learning that we have new viewers and new listeners and new subscribers. But anyway, we appreciate your comment. Richard says, after 2021, the big question was, is Jalen the guy? After 22, we said absolutely runner-up MVP. 23, a step back. So isn't the number one question, which Jalen do we have? 21 average, 22 MVP, 23 average. Am I wrong? I would say no, Richard. You are not wrong. That's been my number one thing coming into the year is I believe this team goes as far as Jalen Hurts will take us. I think he's going to elevate. I think he's going to get better as he consistently has in his career. Johnny Mac, what is your response there to Richard?
Well, you don't just play at an MVP level every single year. And I said at the time, if that's his ceiling, that's fine. He doesn't have to go above that. You can win with Jalen Hurts of 2022. But you knew you're going to have some regression to the mean generally when that kind of stuff happens and you have that type of season. The question is, again, can he take care of the football better? Historically, he's been very good at taking care of the football. Last year, he wasn't. There were certain big spots. It was really bad. That would be number one. Number two is further evolving because defenses adjusted to what he was doing, and they tried to take away what he did well, and he didn't adjust to it as well as hoped. So, what you want to do is get the floor up. Again, that floor versus ceiling debate. If 2022 is the ceiling, hey, that's great. But the floor's got to come up and that consistency from year to year. And he's got to be better than he was in the last, 7 games, as the whole team has to be. But I do think it's overstated. I don't think he was average last season. I think he was really good for a portion of last season.
Well, the problem,
really
Johnny Mac, is it's a "what have you done for me lately" league, and the end of the year looks so bad that nobody remembers the good play earlier in the year. And
exactly,
I can't really knock him. I get it.
It
did happen, right? It's context that must be added, but I do understand why it's easy to just forget that.
Yeah, well, I think if everybody could figure out what the hell happened to this team down the stretch, they would.
Yeah, right.
It was weird. You don't see that. Well, I mean, you just don't see that. You don't see that kind of collapse. And everybody's working to figure out what the hell went wrong. And maybe it's as simple as they lost confidence and they really, San Francisco, Dallas beat the brakes off them and they said, we're not good enough, which is disappointing if that's the case, but maybe it's as simple as that.
James says, Zander, can you add membership gifting? I didn't know I could do that, James. I'll look into that today when I end the show. Thanks for leaving that in there, brother. I will definitely add that. So, John, one more question in the chat I wanted to get to from you. Let me find it real quick. Sorry, the chat moves quick, and I got to go back and now find it. Eduardo says, gentlemen, do y'all think Moore will change his offense to Hurts' style of play?
He better.
He better. There you go. Same answer.
He better. I mean, he's not a good offensive coordinator if he doesn't. And I think he is, and everybody thinks he is. And again, that's my definition of great coaching, not winning the Super Bowl, utilizing your talent the best way possible, maximizing the strengths, minimizing the weaknesses of each player. That's what good coaching is. And if he tries to turn Jalen Hurts into a traditional play action quarterback, I think he's a bad coach. I'll be saying it every day on this show. I don't think he's going to do that. I think he's a good coach, and I think he's going to build the offense around the strengths of the quarterback. And by the way, when the Eagles first started talking about this offense and calling it a meshing of the two offenses, Zander will tell you, I said, I do not like that. If Kellen Moore is a good coach, as the Eagles think he is, that will come naturally. In other words, he will see what Jalen Hurts does well and utilize that. But you can't force him and say, oh, you got to use the RPO on 2nd and 10. No, you let him figure it out and let him evolve his own offense to fit the quarterback. I think you're muted, Zander.
Sorry, I had a lot going on here at Panera. Panera's filling up, everybody. So we have like an additional 50 viewers right now from the people listening to me blab in the corner here to Johnny Mac about the Eagles on June 27th.
Maybe they called mental health on you.
They might have.
Yeah.
Let's go to Mr. Perez here just to close out. We got 2 minutes left to play. He says, why do you think Kellen Moore hasn't been a head coach? Does that worry you? That's a good point, because it's like even Cilio, he tells me every day, he's like, if the team succeeds, you're going to lose a coordinator again and again and again. And I'm like, all right, well, that's what good teams have. That's what happens.
What happens every year.
It is true. Kellen has kind of been in the hiring cycle for a little bit. I mean, he had the #1 offense in Dallas, didn't get the job. Any merit to that, or any reason for concern to that, John?
No, he's 35 years old. He was a player in 2017.
Yeah,
I mean, people are so impatient. I mean, no, he's very young. You know, he interviewed here in 2021. And, you know, think about it. I mean, we're 2024, so he's interviewing for a head coaching job at 32. That's pretty good. And that means you're on the fast track. And if he performs with this talent, he can probably be his head coach as early as next season. I think he's still on track to being a head coach in the NFL. I think ultimately he will be. But to your point, Zander, yeah, I mean, how many coordinators, how many coaches has Andy Reid lost? How many has Bill Belichick lost? It's part of it. Accept it. That BLG says that. I mean, why bother? Why worry about that? It's part of it. If you're successful, people want to take your coaches. I'd rather be successful than unsuccessful. You know, you should want people to take your coaches, because that means you're doing things and you're having a lot of success.
Agreed. So we'll see what happens this year. A good 2-hour show today. Kevin says, I wonder if they think Zander is losing his marbles. Kevin, I've got more eyes today. You would think I'm like a blonde chick walking on the beach in summertime, because everybody's looking at me over here. I mean, it is funny, but good show today.
It's like
John.
you're in the zoo.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun today doing it from Panera, but I think everybody's excited for me to get the hell out of here because I'm just so damn loud in the corner and they're all trying to work. But that's all right. It's a public spot, so I'll be all right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in today. Make sure you guys drop a like on the show. Johnny Mac, good show today, brother. We will catch up with you tomorrow. Just one more day left in the week. Another week going by quick, Johnny Mac. They are cruising by. We are, I think, 71. I think we're at 71
fire marshal
days.
say? Is you going to be up by tomorrow, or you got to go? You got to go back to back.
I might be back.
You're going to really drive him crazy if you got to go back.
I wish I could. Let me see if I could pull. I'd love to pull up the picture real quick of the tree down next to my house, just so everybody knows. It's like it's bad. It's not, and it went right through the power line, so it is. Yeah, the fire marshal basically laughed at me when I said, I got a show at 8 a.m. Am I going to be able to get that up? He's like, dude, look at what I'm dealing with here. Kind of gave me that look. So it was pretty funny. Let me see if I can pull the picture up. I don't know if it'll come through because my internet is not too great over here. But that's all right. I'll show it tomorrow if I can get it up. But Johnny Mac, good show today. Thanks everybody for being here. Slager, see, we had one. We got a generator, and even that's out. My neighbor comes over last night, and he had a tree go through his house. So luckily we got the better brunt of it. But the generators weren't even working. I don't know what was going on last night. Nothing was working. So it's a big problem over there. But we'll get it fixed, and we'll see if we're at Panera again tomorrow. I got the picture. Let me see if I can pull it up here real quick before we get out of here, John. Sorry, I'm keeping you long because I'm trying to show everybody what we're dealing with here.
I want to see the picture.
Here's the picture. Here's the one tree that went up. Let me lower it. Let me get the graphic off there. Yeah, there's the one. So the tree came from across the street, and you can see the power lines. There's my truck right there. Boom! It went right through the power line, knocked it all out, and then up the road a little bit. One of the guy had I forget what it's called, the big electrical box fell off the thing and was laying in his yard almost on fire. So this happened all last night at like 11:30. And I'm about to go to bed, and sirens are going. I'm like, oh God, this is not going to be good. The power went out in the house. So, yeah, nightmare, but we'll get it all fixed up. We'll see if I'm back here tomorrow from Panera Bread on Birds 365.
All right.
We're good show, Johnny Mac.
Now that's like a cliffhanger. So tune in to see if we got Zander Krause from Panera Bread. And we got too many free plugs. Go get a non-free
free plugs today. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Johnny Mac, good show, man. I'll catch up with you tomorrow. All right, brother?
All right. See you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody in the chat. See you guys tomorrow on Birds 365. Appreciate you.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.